Yes, indeed, folks. You're tuning to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Welcome to the show. What a show we have coming up for you today. It's... Yes, it is indeed. Something like that, anyway. What have I been doing this week? Actually, not all that much. I really don't have massive amounts to report. I must attest that I've actually been playing Dragon Quest VIII. Far more than I have been playing WoW. Never mind. There's no particular reason for that, I just kind of fancied a change. I finished my Spellfire set, which is awesome, and I threaded my trousers and all of this cool stuff, and like, yeah, okay, where's the next raid? Okay, let's go and raid. Then we'll go play something else. It's just kind of feeling I've got for the game right now, and I think that's fine. It allows me to do all of these wonderful other things, like apparently there's other games. I don't know when this happened. I assume they just copied the idea of World of Warcraft and came up with new titles that were completely and totally different, like Forza Motorsport 2 and Tetris. Copying off Blizzard. Disgraceful. Right, coming up this week in the show, we have, of course, the one and only...
Second Wind!
I'm also very pleased to... Well, I am pleased, you probably won't be, to say that, of course, Rap in the Forums will be returning this week since the child did not paint itself green. Yes, something like that. I must also point out that opening queries to me while I'm doing a show is probably one of the stupidest things you can do, because I'm, one, not going to read them, and two, not going to read them, as of course I'm looking very, very sternly at my microphone bars just to ensure that I'm not too loud or quiet. Possibly which. Now that I've deafened half the audience, I'm going to get on with the show, and of course Second Wind. Yes, I did just say...
Second Wind!
Second Wind! Now, what happened last week on Second Wind? Second Wind, we asked you a rather controversial and interesting question. That's, what's your class's weakest tree? What's your support tree, and how the hell would you fix it, assuming you even have a support tree in the first place? Of course, this argument derived from the absolute pasting that I gave Arcane Mages last week, and of course, people disagree with me. Arcane's completely viable. Yeah, a spec is completely viable. If you've got two-piece tier 5, a Shadow Priest support, Bloodlust, pretty much infinite mana, looking at 13-14k mana pool, the right amount of DPS gear, and of course a lightning capacitor. Yeah, perfectly viable. Give it to me now. Anyway, if you want to hear my ranting on Arcane Major, just go and listen to World of Theorycraft, which is on the front page Major's Redux. Go and listen to that, and I will explain why Arcane sucks if you don't have that kind of gear. Anyway, we've got quite a lot of interesting emails. I'm going to kick right into it. Support trees. I'm going to start right now with Ivo, also known as Jut Ranjo. He's a Druid of Mist from Taran Mill. Interestingly speaking, he actually starts with Druids, which is one of the classes which I didn't think had a support tree, but, well, we're about to find out. So let's see what he's got to say. This one is from Jut Ranjo. I'm writing in regards to the Second Wind topic, but not as such. In the past, there was a Druid support tree. It was Balance. I searched for some website that showed this old talent tree, but failed to find any. The old Balance tree, after the 1.8 revamp, I think, had such talents as plus 10% melee damage, an Omen of Clarity in Tier 2, and Swift Shifting. This was removed in 1.8 though. It reduced shape shifting costs by a large percentage if you shifted again within 6 seconds of shifting out. Also, there was Nature's Grasp, but that hasn't moved since WoW went live. This was in the spellcasting tree, but benefited Feral alone. The uncompromised Feral build back when I was 11 to 14 in Balance and 5 in Resto, Rofura. With TBC, they moved everything except Nature's Grasp to Resto and merged it with other talents like Improved Healing Touch, or just moved them around from 11 Balance to 11 Resto, i.e. Omen of Clarity. Any Feral Druid nowadays, at least at 70, specs 11 points into Resto to support his main tree. Thankfully, by merging different talents, they've made them still viable for Resto Druid, so the tree can stand on its own or be a support tree for Feral and Balance. Though not as much, it helps mana regen of Moonkin with 50% mana regen while casting, and also with Subtlety. It's been largely fixed, so now it functions as both a support and as a main tree. Yep. Then last week on the show, I was putting Druids out as an example of something that used to have a tree that wasn't so good, i.e. Balance, that is now a relatively viable tree that can kind of stand on its own 2 feet. And I was also making the argument that, despite the fact that people said, well, Arcane is a perfectly viable raid spec, yeah, with the right gear, it's also a bit of a gimp tree because it's got too many filler talents which are effectively support. Of course, the problem lies in the fact that Arcane is, if anything, a spellcasting school which has a lot of support spells in it in the first place, so you expect the buffs. It's like, improved Blink. Well, it's an arcane spell, so we put it in the arcane tree. Well, yeah, but you would never take it. Improved Wand, improved Mana Shield, Magic Attunement, no one cares about these things, but they just happen to be arcane because arcane was the place where they dumped everything that they couldn't fit in the elemental trees. Now, mages, in some respects, are very much a class which is very stigmatized and very polarized in the way that it's been put together. It's like fire and frost, one or the other. You don't really mix both. And other classes are a little bit different, so let's read a few more emails and see what people have to say. We've got one from a priest here, Barasus, level 70 Troll Shadow Priest on the Mazrigo server. He says this: Hello TB, I play a Shadow Priest on the Mazrigo server, and in my opinion, priests have very good talent trees. You have the Shadow Tree, which now can be used with both PvE and PvP. You've got the Holy Tree, which is a tree that very many healers choose in PvE, and then you've got the Disc Tree. Now, some people might say that the Disc Tree is a support tree, but this is totally wrong in my opinion. Disc spec is really good spec for PvP. Pain Suppression, 60% less damage for some time, and Spell Reflection, 50% of damage versus shield is reflected. With talents like these, I could take down epic PvPers with my Priest, even though my gear was not all that good. Also, it's a good tree to choose for healers. Tough you won't make the top talent. By going Disc Healing spec for PvE or PvP, you get a very mana-efficient build. And also, you get Power Infusion, which increases the caster's damage by 20%. It's a very useful talent. Just take, for example, Curator Power Infusing a Mage during Evocation. Can be the difference between downing him and wiping for guilds that are not all that well geared. So once again, I believe that priests have a very good set of talent trees, but they are a hybrid class. I can understand that Blizz will have problems making non-hybrid classes well balanced, since there are only half the number of options. Great show, TB. Keep up the good work. Have fun in America. Right. Okay, well, let's see if we've got any emails from people that actually disagree with that. That is an interesting opinion. I have to say that I haven't seen all of that many people saying that Disc is a viable thing on its own. And indeed, we've got some guy here. His name is Tappen. He's a Night Elf Priest on Medivh US, and he says this: Hey TB, been listening to the show for several months now, but always been too late on the second wind. Being a Holy Priest, one of the few left, I have particular interest in the problem of talent trees, including the support tree. Now I will address the discipline tree, and also briefly the Hunter survival tree, since I've played both characters and have tried specking heavily in both support specs. Initially, I felt a great deal of frustration with the Priest discipline talents and the Hunter survival talents, when I only PvE raided and there were no arenas. The advent of the Arena Battleground changed all of that. I think that Blizzard has made a special interest in adjusting the talent trees that may have been initially PvE support trees into a more PvP orientated tree, and also vice versa, since some classes have what can be called a support tree and some have what would be deemed a PvP tree. Though obviously there can be differing options on this. A Moonkin Druid obviously would not think of balance as support, nor would a Protection Paladin think of the Proc tree as support, and so on and so forth. However, the contrast of a PvP tree mixing with a PvE support tree is essentially true for priests and hunters, although I cannot especially comment on mages since I don't play one. The priest discipline tree contains meditation, hallmarks of PvE specs. A holy priest healing diversity is not always matched by its mana longevity, and so at least 13 points is necessary for a PvE build, absolute minimum. He claims no priest can spec for raiding without meditation, it's just not wise. In addition, there is Divine Spirit and Improved Divine Spirit, which is necessary for the Holy Priest to get into 25-man raids these days, and requires 23 points in Discipline. This means that a Holy Priest, who wants to provide the one intangible benefit that it brings to raids, must be a hybrid build with 23 points in Discipline. This is silly. From a raiding perspective, the Discipline tree becomes worthless fluff beyond those two talents and Silent Resolve, which lowers threat. However, in PvP, the Discipline tree is stacked with useful talents. Improved mana burn, focused power, martyrdom, and a reflective shield is also very good. To fix this is actually quite tricky, since you run the risk of allowing players to get all they want in terms of support for both PvP and PvE without having to make tough choices, which is what the point of talent trees is, in my honest opinion. But what I would do is this: make Divine Spirit trainable, and make Improved Divine Spirit a third 15 tier, third as in 15 point, tier talent rather than a fourth tier. Move Meditation to the second tier and move Martyrdom to the third tier, allowing purely PvE Holy Priest to get Meditation and Spirit without sacrificing a 41-point build in Holy. Small changes that fix issues without completely removing the tough choices from the trees. As for Survival Hunters, I believe that Blizzard did a great deal in making Survival a pure PvP tree, from being a pure PvP tree into a PvE-friendly build. Honestly, I think that while Survival was previously one of the most broken of all trees, it's viable now, as I'm sure Ahok from Nihilum will tell you. The biggest improvement was to Survival Instincts and Exposed Weakness, the hallmark of the Survival PvE raiding build. Survival Instincts previously reduced damage taken by up to 6%. Now it also increases ranged attack power by 6% per rank. Sorry, 246% per rank. Expose weakness previously allowed at max rank a 66% chance to expose a weakness on the target whenever the hunter crit. This weakness would improve all attack power in the raid by 25% of the hunter's agility for 7 seconds. This has been patched to 100% at max rank. This is an extremely good raid buff at max rank and allows the survival tree to be an exceptionally good raid support tree and a PvP tree. The reason you don't see as much of it as Blizzard intended is that the Beast Mastery tree allows for more sustained DPS with an easier shot rotation, while still providing the ferocious inspiration buff. This speaks to problems with hunter stat to DPS ratios rather than the actual trees themselves. Anyway, I think that Blizzard wants to consolidate a raid support tree rather than a self-support tree in some cases with PvP trees. This is obviously not the case for all classes, I just speak of the two that I am most familiar with. Kongan Tanks All, and that's from TAP. Yeah, so two very conflicting opinions on how Disc works. And when I was looking into my search for Disc and of course speaking to Ariana, who has had so many priests on her account, it beggars belief, we pretty much came to the same conclusion. There are some unmissable talents in Disc. It seems to me that the whole meditation thing with Disc was kind of like we used to be with Mages with Evocation. We still go into Arcane 10 points for clear casting no matter what build you're in, because clear casting is pretty much unmissable. And it's interesting to see that stuff like that actually exists. The problem, of course, being how far do you go into a tree and how far do you have to go into a tree? Most people, as far as I'm aware, don't complain about putting 10 points in Arcane to get clear casting. But putting that many points in Discipline, that's a lot of points. I mean, you're looking at least 13 points necessary and 23 points in order to get Divine Spirit. Which is, yeah, I would agree. It pretty much is one of the essential things in a raid. I don't see any real reason, I'm going to be brutally honest here, to take Holy Priests aside from having Divine Spirit. There's other people who have exactly the same problem on that one. You look at what Ray said, for instance, on Four Horsemen. He is a Holy Priest, and he is seeing himself being out-healed and just outmoded by people who have more utility than he does. Shadow Priests, of course, being now so powerful that most people will just take him, and Shadow has become apparently the main spec for priests, and that's interesting to see. It demonstrates more than anything that there's a lot of interesting combinations, but the more interesting combinations that you seem to put in, the more hybrid specs you buff up, the more problems you have with other trees. Discipline does seem to be one of the whipping boys. I can't remember people really speccing heavily into Disc at any point for raiding, and I can see why. Yeah, Power Infusion's nice, but you're sacrificing so many other things, and you're expecting a Holy Priest to go without their 41 point talent, and that just seems a little bit daft to me. Is the 41 point talent good enough to replace Divine Spirit? One would assume not, as people are going into Divine Spirit so far, and of course the 25 man's well. Do you really have room for people who don't have something which can really benefit the raid like that? And therein lies the problem, and that is why some people view it as a support tree. Okay, I've got time for maybe one more email. Yeah, let's have a look. This is an interesting one. And it's from a Dan Lewis, also known as Ryu. And he says this: I'm emailing in about last week's Second Wind topic about support trees and the weakness of some trees. First, a bit about me. I played WoW for 2 years now, and the server that I'm playing on is EU Vash. And he's got 3 level 70s, a human warrior, a knight elf druid, and undead mage. I have to admit, I disagree with your views that all classes have a single support tree by default. In my honest opinion, all trees act as support trees to other builds. Okay, let's go for this one. Okay, an example. Warriors have 3 builds: Arms PvP, Fury PvE, and Prot Tanking. Taking your example that all classes have one support tree, looking over the warrior talents, you'll see that no one tree is useless after the 10-20 point mark that would point to a support tree. But if we look at the trees with the other builds, 31 and 41 pointers in mind, they do become a support tree. A heavy prot build will need at least 8 points in Arms for 5% parry and improved Thunderclap, and also might need points in Fury for boosted shouts. Arms need points in Fury and to a lesser extent Prot for crit and rage, and Tactical Mastery, and Fury needs points in Arms for Impale. No one tree is a support tree, but when you take the new skills and abilities that a heavy build will give you, you look at tree A. Basically saying that if you go heavy into one build, then you're going to need to go into, tree. If you go into heavy into build B, you'll need to go heavy into trees A, and it's some into tree A and C to support it. And this covers apparently all classes. This is what he's arguing here. He says, you mentioned druids. To a failed druid, at least 11 points as resto is a must. Balance needs points to resto also. The general rule is someone's build is 61 points, they have a nerfed character. Okay, PvE druid resto and PvP frost can deal with 61 point specs. Every build needs a support talent or ability from another tree. Trees that on their own would be considered useless, i.e. arcane, are boosted to much better levels with sub-talents. So, you're talking about mixed. This sadly limits your choice quite a lot, but hey, it can be played with. And now where I rant, give my opinions. You say an arcane spec is useless, a pure 61 point build is useless, but when I spec 48-11-2, currently Frost PvP, I did top DPS charts against equally and more conventionally spec mages. I found that not letting Arcane Blast build past 2 charges unless you're nuking, using Fireball and Scorch till the debuff ends, and saving AP and Arcane Missiles for him clear casting, add some spirit to your gear, and pray for 2 bits of tier 5, and it's a very powerful spec. Mine with lower level gear, fire groin stomps it into oblivion. I have to admit, one spec, why? We'll probably come back to this one after the break, because, good lord, there is a huge amount to cover on this topic, which is fine by me, as far as I'm concerned. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. This is Metal Sonic. We loves it. Scrambled Egg OC Remix. Enjoy.
ha 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 ha.